Hello, I'm Brad Gobby and I've been invited by the editors of Discourse to briefly talk about my paper, Putting the System into a School Autonomy Reform. There has been significant reform to the governance of school systems across parts of the world, with many education systems moving towards maximising school and principal autonomy. In 2009, the Western Australian government initiated a contractualist reform of the largely centralised management of the WA education system. Called the Independent Public Schools Program, the initiative provided selected state schools with the authority to operate with a range of so-called flexibilities. School principals were authorised to recruit and hire staff, determine their school staffing profile, and to manage a one-line budget. Although neoliberalisation of school system governance is occurring elsewhere, we should not rush to judge IPS as emulating charter schools, free schools, or academies. There is a temptation to use a concept like neoliberalism as a catch-all term to explain reforms and programs like IPS. However, doing so potentially diminishes our understanding of the uniqueness and particularities of reform, as well as impoverishing our understanding of neoliberalism and modern government. This paper uses Foucault's notions of governmentality and power to draw out the ambiguities of neoliberalism and school reform. Through its analysis of political and departmental documents and interviews conducted with IPS principals, education department bureaucrats involved in the program, and the education minister at the time, the paper draws attention to the messy actualities of operationalizing programs of government like IPS. The analysis argues that through the practices of contractualization, the IPS reform does operationalize a wider neoliberal program of government formulated in government documents concerning public sector reform. There is a strong new public management discourse operating through the reform, with documents and interviews problematizing bureaucracy and promoting local decision-making and the user-centered practices of the private sector. But implementing programs of government and reforming the practices of government is messy and difficult. For example, reform must contend with political and stakeholder opposition, the pragmatic realities of operationalizing government objectives and visions in the real world, and also the unintended effects of the initiatives implemented. The paper highlights how strategic, pragmatic, and political circumstances interact with the neoliberal visions of governors in ways that shape the development and enactment of their political projects. In short, reforms might not be characterised as entirely neoliberal. The analysis leads us to the exploration of IPS's curious coupling of school autonomy and the promotion of the state's school system. The paper argues that the system is not something we might expect to see in a truly neoliberal reform, but its use reflects the complex practices of politics and government. The system is inserted into the reform in a variety of ways, from taking heat out of the politics of the initiative to regulating excessively entrepreneurial IPS principles by invoking a dual responsibility to their school and to the system. In taking this approach, the paper draws attention to the particularities and ambiguities of programs of government like IPS, so that we can better analyse and theorise neoliberalism, government and education reform. I hope you find the paper both interesting and worthwhile.